Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, episode 129.
Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
Today I'm with Chris Hinsz. I always pronounce that wrong. I say Hines, but it's Hinsz. Did I get that right even the second time?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much for having me, Keith.
Well, glad to have you here. A couple of weeks ago in Lisbon at the WLPC EU conference we had a live announcement of some of the new features, and I thought it'd be good to just get with the man himself directly, and let's get a podcast about all the new cool things and features coming out from NetScout. I was part of the Mobility Field Day 2, where we were under embargo, so we couldn't talk. But we can talk now. So how are you doing, Chris?
I'm doing just great. And yeah, so you got to hear it a couple times, and you got to hear it early.
And we were so quiet, but we didn't say a word. You teaser, you. Anyway, well, now that we're behind embargo, tell us about all the new features that are in the NetScout AirCheck G2.
Love to. So, one of the first things, and probably, kind of the marquee feature, and I think this went over pretty well, both with you guys in the room at that time, as well as in Lisbon, is performance testing on the AirCheck G2. And this is something that we have had requested from a lot of users for a while now. And what we did was we took iPerf, because that's a pretty standard performance testing tool, and we've mapped that across onto the AirCheck G2. So now after you connect to either an access point or a network, you'll have a little button down at the bottom. And when you click on that button, it says iPerf test. And you'll come to your next screen where you can pick your iPerf server, and away you go.
Well, thank you for being descriptive. This is a podcast. It's audio only. So as you see those things in your mind, go ahead and just keep describing them like that. I like that. So you're saying the perf testing works either if you're using this with the, I call it the link sprinter port on the side, because it acts like a link sprinter. It's just an Ethernet port, but it should say link sprinter as well as Wi-Fi. So you can test either mode.
It'll run out either one, although we really are focused, and most of our performance testing is focused around the wireless. So we really focused on the wireless portion. The really nice thing that we also brought into this, and we talked, you and I even talked, I think, offline about this when you were out here, is that a lot of people find setting up an iPerf server to be a real hassle. So one of the things that we did in conjunction with this software release on the AirCheck G2 was we added a new little accessory to our portfolio here at NetScout that we call the test accessory. And one of the things it can do is it can act as an iPerf server. And it's about the shape. It's funny you brought up the link sprinter. It's about the size and shape of a link sprinter. We reused some of that packaging. And it allows somebody to just plug it in, runs off battery or PoE, and that can now be a kind of an iPerf server in your pocket. And the AirCheck will automatically detect these for you. So I mentioned that there was an iPerf server selection screen. If the iPerf detects one of these nice little test accessories, it'll automatically list it for you with its IP address.
So you could have multiple test accessories, leave them around your network. How far does it find them? I'm guessing on a local subnet, it'll just do a broadcast for them. But what if they're on the other side of a subnet?
Oh, that's awesome. I appreciate you actually teeing that up for me, because we get a lot of questions around discovery and how that will work. And there are 4 methods by which the AirCheck will track down a test accessory. One, like you just said, it's obviously going to search the subnet for the wireless connection you just connected to. That's the thing it most obviously knows about. There's a second thing it will do, and that is if you have run a Ethernet connectivity test, you brought up that little, kind of link sprinter-esque port on the side of the AirCheck. If you've run an Ethernet test recently, it will also check the subnet for the last wired connection test. And what that allows is, say you're a technician, you're on a site, you got to a place, you have your little test accessory in your pocket, you see a cable there, you want to plug in and use that to run a performance test, but you may not know what subnet that is, you may not know what IP address is going to get served out of there. Well, now you can just plug that cable into the side of the AirCheck first, run a wired connection test. You've basically now seeded your AirCheck G2 with that information. Now you plug your test accessory in, it comes up, you connect to the wireless, and now, well, after the AirCheck checks first the wireless subnet, it will then go through and check that last wired subnet as well. And so if it knows that information, it's going to go find it that way.
I like that. That's a nice use case, because you're right. There are times you just see a cable or a jack someplace and go, how do I get here? So
exactly.
I like that. I like that technique. And the third technique?
The third technique is a manual one. So we have a little place for you to enter a subnet manually if you'd like. That's sort of the, in case of emergency, break glass type of thing. So if you're completely cut off in a building, you don't know anything going on, but you have this one little bit of information you do know to get to your test accessory, you can put that in. But really, it's number 4 that we think most people are going to really appreciate.
Okay, you set that one up nicely.
Yeah, so as you know, we're big believers in our Link Live cloud repository to help manage all your test results and all your devices. So if you have your AirCheck G2 adopted to Link Live, and if you have all your test accessories adopted to Link Live, then what the AirCheck's going to do after it gets connectivity to your network is it's going to query Link Live. And it's going to say, hey, Link Live, can you tell me about all the test accessories in my organization? And it's going to pull that list down. And then it will do a quick reachability test to each of those just to make sure that it can actually reach that test accessory. We all know in networking, it's conceivable that both of the two things could be able to reach Link Live, but maybe they can't get to each other. So it'll gray those out if it can't actually get to them. But now, boom, you just got a complete list. If you gave them friendly names in Link Live, those friendly names are going to populate in the list. So it's a very quick and easy way for somebody to get their full list, pick the one they want, and be off and running.
If you're using these in an organization where you had, some test endpoints in various locations across your network, some close, some far. What if you had multiple air checks? Is there a way to block so that one isn't in the middle of doing a test when you ask it to do another test? I would think that would kind of skew the results if it was that little guy was trying to run multiple tests simultaneously.
That is true. He doesn't exactly have the beefiest processor in the world on him. So if two people try and run tests at exactly the same time, you could end up with some skewed results, kind of skewing lower throughput than you might expect. Well, honestly, right now we haven't done anything special to avoid this case. We can look at it if we get a lot of feedback. Frankly, given that the test only runs for at most a couple minutes, we figure that you just have really bad luck if you and one of your compatriots decide to run a performance test against the exact same test accessory at the exact same minute.
Yeah, that would be a kind of statistically small sample to pull that one off. I was just wondering if that was a piece built in. Okay, so this new version of firmware on the AirCheck, having updated mine, it was amazingly simple. Just hit the button, let it reboot again, and you're now with the new features. What other features, in addition to performance, will we see in our NetScout AirChecks?
Sure. So we got a couple other things sprinkled in here, and I'm happy to go through them. So the second thing is another one we got a lot of feedback on. A lot of people are asking for us to implement, which is the ability to support a captive portal. Now, I know how you feel about captive portals, Keith. So you'll have to forgive us, but there are still a lot of them out there. So that does mean we have to support it.
Whether I like them or not doesn't change the fact that they exist. So it's definitely a need that's been around.
Yep. So they're all over the place. And we historically on the AirCheck, if you had a captive portal, during a connection test, once it got to that place where the wireless network was expecting a user to say, I accept these terms and conditions, or put in their last name and their room number or whatever it might be, the AirCheck didn't have a means to do that. And that was then causing the connection test to fail. So what we've done is we've added a very small web browser into the AirCheck. And so if you tell the AirCheck that, hey, this network is a captive portal network, it will pop up that thin web browser at the appropriate place. It will allow you to interact with that website in whatever means you need to. And then once you've clicked OK, ticked whatever box, whatever you need to do there, it'll go ahead and close that back out, and you'll be able to proceed with the rest of your connection test.
Nice way to finish that up. I don't know as a Wi-Fi tester if that was actually necessary, because by the time you got the captive portal, everything's working. I mean, the test should have said, yes, we're Wi-Fi successful, but I don't know about the internet. behind here. But with this added, it gives you that ability for that connection test to actually come up with a success and not a failure. It kind of freaks people out to see the failure.
It does, and I think the problem that we were seeing is that, and the most common people expressing this need were people that were arming, some of their lower end techs with this. And certainly, I don't think there was going to be any confusion on, for example, your part, that if you got that far, everything was likely okay with the wireless infrastructure. But people were having a real challenge explaining to some of their technicians that it was actually okay. The fact that it kind of got there and then finally hung and stopped had proved out everything they wanted to prove out. And so they really needed to be able to get all the way through that and have that tech understand everything that had happened. So, I'd love to say that everybody who ever needs one of our test tools is as knowledgeable about Wi-Fi and networking as you, Keith, but it simply isn't the case.
Well, that's what the market for these is for. So I'm glad you're able to finish that up. Well, okay. So we have performance testing. We also have the ability to get past a captive portal. I think not everyone who has a G2 has used the Ethernet port on the side. Just run through some of the features you have on that Ethernet port.
Sure. The Ethernet port is, we're trying to make the AirCheck G2 sort of your definitive wireless testing tool and everything you might need as you're trying to deploy, manage, and deal with a wireless network. And so one of the things that we had realized is sometimes your problem as you're installing APs is you've got this cable and you don't know if that cable's good to go. You kind of called it like a little mini link sprinter, and that's effectively what it is. The goal of this is you plug it in, you run a connectivity test. It's going to let you see whether or not you can get access to the basic network services such as DHCP, DNS, etc. It's going to let you know if there's PoE on that line, because 9 times out of 10, the AP you're about to plug in is a PoE-based AP. And so now you can feel comfortable that, hey, this Ethernet jack is good and ready to go. And if I plug this AP and then mount it, I'm going to expect good things.
Well, some of the features I like using a link runner for is that it does a PoE draw. So I know that it actually can run AT or AF, whatever it's set, as well as the ability to find the VLAN and port number I'm on. Does the AirCheck's Ethernet do any of those 3 things? The PoE draw, the port, and VLANs?
We don't actually draw power. That is something that we reserve for our link runner line. So we see what is advertised, but we don't actually verify that by drawing the power. That's something that the link runner line of products do. We also
takes a really big heat sink to pull that off.
It does. And for those people who remember, for example, the first generation, that like the size and shapes of these things are roughly equal. So once we start ripping out a bunch of RJ45s and stuff, we basically have just enough room to kind of get that 802.11 radio in there. So yeah, we had to sacrifice some of the power draw circuitry for that. But c'est la vie.
Well, it's a minor thing. If you don't trust your PoE, what it says it's going to do, that's a whole nother process to make sure because even if you trust and you're pulling one, that doesn't mean you have the PoE budget on the switch. It just means that single port right now under no other load does. So it's kind of a snapshot in time anyway. I was just asking.
No, and it's a good question, and it's something that we do get asked on occasion, and that is more of a link runner feature. We can identify some of the VLANs, but we also don't go as in depth in terms of VLAN and tagging management on an AirCheck as we do on a link runner as well.
Well, good. Okay. So then the next item down is this interferers button. So tell us how the interferers button does this with the hardware. We didn't change our hardware. It's still the exact hardware it was last week, and now it has this interferers button. So what was the magic behind that?
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing that up. That is very true. It is the exact same hardware. So I know it's very tempting sometimes, especially when you hear about a big RF feature like this, to kind of think, oh gosh, well, they came out with a new version and now my version's obsolete. Nope. This is still a software upgrade. So if you've got a 1.x code version of AirCheck G2, you install it. What we're going to do is we're going to use that Wi-Fi radio, and we're going to try and utilize some of the logic that's built into that radio to scan and look for interfering technologies. Now, it is a Wi-Fi radio, so I'm certainly not going to say that it is able to produce the sort of FFT that something like an Air Magnet Spectrum XT will, but it still does a pretty doggone reliable job of telling you if there's a video camera, a wireless mouse, Zigbee, Bluetooth, or microwaves in the area.
Having tested it, I was shocked at how good it was. Knowing that there's a Wi-Fi chip underneath it, it still can find maybe not as many as that I tested against an XT, but some of the just standard ones, it was just popping them up within mere seconds. I was amazed how fast it was.
Yeah, we've been very pleasantly surprised by how well it performs, and I think that a lot of our technicians that rely on us for this analyzing Wi-Fi every day are going to be very pleased to see some of that identification show up in their hand. Now, one of the things that we did try to do to kind of focus this in and make it more reliable is we do try to ensure that we're only alerting about interferers that we think are really interfering with your Wi-Fi. So that does mean that some of the lower power technologies or some of these things that now have adaptive scan patterns will not always show up. And we actually look at that as a good thing because we don't want to send you on a wild goose chase tracking down something that really isn't causing you problems.
Good call. I mean, sometimes you can see things in a FFT on a high density, very tight resolution spectrum analyzer that you really don't need to be doing anything about. So I think that was a good call on your part. So where did you get, or I guess I won't ask it as a question. Did you pull all of these signatures from Spectrum XT code? I mean, you're kind of internal there.
Yeah, obviously I can certainly say that a lot of our knowledge and history with Spectrum XT helped us to develop this on the AirCheck, and we were able to leverage a lot of that knowledge base and a lot of what we had done. Being a Wi-Fi radio, obviously there were certain things that we couldn't implement or things that we needed to tweak or alter, and certainly working with our chipset provider, things were made a lot easier, and they had done a lot of great work. But I would say certainly our history with Spectrum XT gave us a sure leg up on getting this functioning.
Well, my question is kind of leading to the next question of if there's some new signature files in XT, is that something we can, or say we did a custom XT, it's one of the features of Spectrum XT to be able to have a custom signature. Is there a way to port those over to a G2?
At this time, there's not. So there's no way to directly create, for example, a custom one. Now that we have this added into AirCheck G2, that of course gives us a foundation that we can continue to build upon. So as we look forward and look at what will be in future releases, be they 2.x or even 3.x as we go forward, those are certainly some things that are on the table for us to investigate now that we've got the baseline feature in place.
Well, it's a great new feature, and it's right on the top menu, so you can't miss it. In fact, I've got a couple of Bluetooth interferers right now. I just sitting here. I mean, sometimes if they're really loud, they're extremely fast. Others, like Bluetooth, take a little while before you start going, yeah, and then it finds it. So any update to this as far as the client side when you were doing the update to this latest version?
We didn't make a lot of changes to the clients. We have had a couple suggestions that I think are pretty interesting. I'll still keep those kind of close to the vest for now. So we've always got a good hopper of ideas, and we have a very active community at WLAN Pros and among the influencer community with cool thoughts that we can do with the AirCheck, and it makes a very nice platform for development. For this release, we didn't do too much on the client side. We were very focused around the performance and the interferers.
Well, if someone already had a G2, they had purchased one within the last, I don't know, they've been around, 2 years now?
Yep, a couple of years.
And they wanted to get this upgrade. What's the process if they hear all this talk, they go, I've got a G2, I want to get this firmware upgrade. What's the process they need to go through to get that?
Okay, well, if they already are a gold support member, so if they already had active support from NetScout, then all they need to do is they go onto their My NetScout account, and they can find that My account on our webpage. And they log in, and they will now have access to download that because they would have already had their product registered. If they never bought gold support for the product, or they let it expire because they got busy with doing actual work and not keeping up on invoices, I think we can all relate to that one. Then they would just need to contact their local sales rep and say, hey, I'd really like to get my unit under gold support so I can get access to this great 2.0 firmware.
Good idea. I like that. That just brings a kind of total segue, different question. Some NetScout products, Wi-Fi Analyzer Survey, are sold and you need to add on, this is just a respeller speaking, you have to add on a year's gold support right from the beginning, but G2s don't. It's like it's an option and the others isn't. Is there some logic behind that, or is just it's a piece of hardware rather than software?
I mean, really, the logic around it was that for software-oriented products, historically, in that Air Magnet in particular, historically, they've taken the position that as a software product, you really need to be taking updates at least for that first year. For hardware-oriented products, that was not as hard and fast of a requirement. The way I personally look at it is I think almost anybody should really look at having support on their devices, particularly for those that we are taking such an active interest in expanding and developing on, because that's how you get access to this cool stuff.
And point taken, this new update was definitely, if you didn't have gold support, you should have, because it's taking a piece of hardware without changing the hardware at all and giving it a whole set of new features. So very impressive.
Yeah, and I'm hearing from some of our partner community that they're getting a lot of phone calls from their customer base just saying, hey, I got to get gold on my units.
Exactly. So it worked. So it was a good thing for your team. On other news, you also have other products in the NetScout / Air Magnet family: Wi-Fi Analyzer, Survey, Spectrum XT. Any updates coming down that way? Anything you can share with us about those?
Yeah, we're still working on those products. We take a lot of impact from the community and kind of the things that they feed back to us. I think one thing that we're currently really looking at is how we can kind of tie together a lot of our troubleshooting products, to make them kind of cooperate even better together. You gave a great example earlier about, hey, I can do this in XT. Wouldn't it be nice if I had mirroring functionality in AirCheck? So we're looking at how we can kind of get all these things to be on a common platform and a common use model. Certainly, we know that the guy who uses an AirCheck is probably not necessarily always the same guy in the company that's using something like Wi-Fi Analyzer, but we do expect that in a lot of companies, there are copies of both at play at different levels in the organization. So we're always looking at good places we can create good synergies between the different product lines to give more value for those people who own more pieces of the kit.
Well, and I do believe there's that the reverse of your last statement is even more true. Those with Wi-Fi Analyzer do have G2s. I would imagine most G2 owners don't have Wi-Fi Analyzer, but the reverse is totally opposite, because it's a nice feeder into it, so you don't have to whip out your Wi-Fi Analyzer. You can just get a quick answer. At least that's how I use it.
That's a very fair point. And in fact, that's something that because of talking to folks like yourself and some of the other key influencers in the wireless space, one of the things I often tell people internally is, we have a love of the tool down at the low end where people don't really understand much and they really appreciate how much it simplifies things for them. And then we have a love of the tool up at the high end where people know enough to be able to look at what the AirCheck is presenting them and immediately make those intuitive leaps to, I think I know what's going on.
And it's a big, broad market, so that's pretty good. If you owned a G2 before, and now there's a test accessory, we can buy test accessories individually, or I'm assuming in bundles if you're going to buy a new G2. Is there any limit to the number of accessories? And I guess this is a multi-part question. How does one go about getting a test accessory, and how many can they have?
So that's a great question. Thank you very much for kind of teeing that up. So yes, there will be a new kit at a new price point that will include a test accessory. So going forward, if you wanted to buy one, or if you were outfitting more people in a team, that would obviously be the one you'd want to look at. We do have 3 different model SKUs for the test accessory sold separate from an AirCheck that people might want to look at. So we have a singleton unit purchase. There's a 5-pack and a 10-pack. Obviously, if you had a large group of people who had AirChecks and now you want to give all of them a test accessory, taking that volume discount is going to be valuable. The other way of looking at it, and this is where we don't really set a limit on how many you can have. And part of that reason is we're also talking to people, folks like, I think a buddy of yours that you've talked to in the past, people like George Stefanik, we talked to him about this. He was a key part of our press release on this new feature, and his plan is to actually buy a whole bunch of these and seed them throughout his network, leaving them in place so that he can just tell people, hey, test to whatever resource you need. There's a bunch of these already in place for you. So that's the other reason for these big bundles is folks that want to use it in that manner and see a lot of value in having this interspersed with their network can simply do so.
Well, not to mention from your Link Live account, you can also go back through and say, if people have been hitting them, what's the average? I mean, you can look at some statistics coming off of these test accessories you seed throughout your organization. So I like that idea. Test accessory works with AirCheck today.
Mm-hmm.
Does it work with any of your other product lines? Like as an endpoint to a link runner or? As
of today, as we're talking, it works with an AirCheck G2. Part of the reason why you see the name of it being test accessory and not like AirCheck accessory or AirCheck iPerf or something along those lines is because we really envision that because just like iPerf has applicability across a wide variety of network needs, we see this test accessory in the same manner. So I would not be at all surprised if you kept watching NetScout, if you saw releases across our product lines over the course of the next who knows how number of months, in which this is being added on for any number of our products.
Oh, you just keep teasing, but you're very good at that. So if today you can only use it with an AirCheck officially, can you use this test accessory if I just were running iPerf on my own box?
It is standard iPerf, and so if you wanted to go try and run a test against it, that's not something that we're not going to block. So certainly, if you wanted to do that, you can go ahead and do that, and we're not going to get in the way of it. I certainly would.
iPerf 2 or iPerf 3?
It is iPerf 3.
A special port or just standard was 5202?
It standardizes to 5201 if memory serves, but that is changeable if you want. Now, I do definitely recommend that folks, adopt these into Link Live because we are doing all the firmware management out of Link Live. So I know that a number of people have run tests with this, and every time we find a foible that shows up, we're just pushing a new release via Link Live to these little puppies.
It's just a nice little tool. I think of it as a black link sprinter. I'm glad you didn't have it the same color. Though I was kind of going to go for the green, but the black makes it, because when you look at it, if they're in your bag, they look and feel identical. You got to see it rather than just feel it.
Yes, that's true. If you're rummaging around in the dark, you're not going to be able to tell the difference.
In Lisbon, a couple of people asked questions like, well, how come it doesn't do link sprinter functions? Like, it's not a link sprinter. I mean, there's barely enough room in there inside there doing. I mean, you take the batteries out, there's not a lot of space left.
There really isn't. So we liked the mechanicals, and and certainly we were able to leverage a fair amount of the design. But when you start talking about all the overhead and all things a link sprinter does, you don't have a lot of power left to start running things like iPerf servers. So it's really a one or the other type of thing.
They both run off of PoE or batteries. Just side question, someone also asked, if you put in rechargeables, will the PoE trickle them up?
No, we didn't build charging logic in. So if you have rechargeables in there, it won't charge them off PoE.
Not that it should. That was just a question that someone had brought up. Well, any other news in NetScout that's exciting for the wireless industry? Or not exciting, that's good too.
Nothing else I'm cleared to talk about, but certainly I think, you can see it with this release here. We're doing a lot of fun stuff over here at NetScout, and I think if people continue to watch us, they're going to be pretty pleasantly surprised at some of the things we've got in the hopper.
Well, Chris, thank you for your time. It has been great to talk a little bit about the upgrade to the AirCheck G2 and all the new features and the new test accessory. Oh, one final question, just pricing for those people who are listening who either don't have a G2, shame on you, or are thinking about the test accessory. What are the pricing, the MSRP on those two?
Sure. So our list price for the full kit, which would include a test accessory, is just a hair over $3,000. So you're looking at $3,095. And for the test accessory itself, that lists for $495. So, and certainly they can reach out to their local resellers and their partners, and they can see, what sort of pricing they can get from those folks directly. I'm sure a lot of our partners, particularly people who have good relationship with some of our listeners, probably can get even better pricing than that. But those are our suggested list prices.
Well, thank you again for your time. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll get this up and and share this information with our audience.
Great. Always a pleasure talking with you, Keith.
Thanks.
10 Talks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mike Lane. I'm with Extreme Networks. I'm a new CWNE. I just got certified after the Phoenix conference, and this is my first 10 Talks, so just a little bit nervous. Not really. Anyway, I chose this topic simply because I'm really not here to shill for my company, even though I put it right in the title there that this is something that is a differentiator for this particular product. When I saw this in a training, when I saw this feature, I thought, wow, this is the bee's knees. I thought, this is something that I would really use and that we can use. So I just want to throw it out there and let everybody know that it's there. Some vendors do a subset of what I'm about to show you, and I think that all the vendors, all the bigger enterprise vendors, the full features vendors should be doing something like this. So this is really just a call to action that this should be a standard feature. So what is Wing? If anybody doesn't already know, Wing came from Symbol, then Motorola, then Zebra, and now us. Extreme Networks has two platforms. Our Extreme Wireless, our legacy Extreme Wireless, which is still a very active and developed platform, comes from Identify, HighPath, Siemens, Chantry, and we have acquired Zebra this last year. So big things about Wing, they're really special for these verticals, retail, hospitality, transportation, and logistics. And I have personally deployed them and I've heard stories about deployments in some very exotic locations. So Wing is everywhere and can solve quite a few interesting problems. So since its main deployment model was for very large-scale retail and manufacturing logistics deployments, does very good meshing, that kind of thing, it really needed good tools for remote administration. So these tools are available. Some of these tools came from air defense and have been ported in, but these are all now available in standard Wing. And they're just accessed through the Wing management system called Insight. So I'm going to be focusing on the top one, packet capture, but a brief mention of the others. Packet capture, what's special about it, we're about to see. But wireless debugging, more than just syslog. We look at radius messages. We look at a lot of different types of messages. That one deserves a 10 talk on its own, I think, actually, because of how full-featured that is. Ping traceroute, that's pretty obvious. AP testing, that's interesting, far more than a ping test or a traceroute test, but there's throughput tests. We do client emulation tests. That's a cool one too. And then spectrum analysis, that did come from air defense, and that's been ported over. And again, that could use its own 10 talk. So you can do all of these throughout the enterprise, beyond the enterprise really, because Wing can scale globally to tens of thousands of APs in a single domain. Well, different radio frequency domains, of course, over several countries, but in a single administrative domain. So, packet capture, it says, I put it here, capture only what you want, capture anywhere, capture everywhere. So this is the main crux of my point today, is that you can narrow in on a single client and capture throughout the entire RF domain and keep that going. There are some limits in the number of packets you can do in a single run and limits in the file size for now, and I'm not sure if we're going to be expanding on that, but usually for this kind of targeted packet capture, the limits are well within. It's 4,000 packets, 15 megabytes. So this is the overall view of what the tool looks like, and this is a zoom in of exactly where you would set up a packet capture. And so the key thing is, these are the two big things. So capture locations, we can capture at bridge on an AP. Oh, this is all the APs, of course. All dropped frames, wired frames, or wireless frames. And this is a little bleached out, but you have choices here, exactly where you would do that. So wired, like which VLAN, which port, that kind of stuff. So in the direction. So if they're multi-port, and in what direction. Okay, so that's that. And then the filter. Another key part of this, filter by MAC address, IP, protocol, or port, TCP or UDP port, meaning. So that's that. So here's the workflow. First thing you have to do, it's 2 steps, real simple. And in the 2-step workflow, first is identify the client. Of course, you can capture, just like most enterprise vendors, you can capture an AP, and you can do it in line. So you do not have to take an AP offline. But this is different, right? So find the client. We have, and I think most vendors have pretty good reporting on clients. I think we do it better, but that's just my opinion. In here, you can get all this detail everything you'd want to know about its current association, detail about the client, location, usage, errors, all that kind of stuff. So we go find one based on maybe a criteria. We might have found this through a report, high retransmissions in a certain area of the building, go drill down, find maybe that there's one client that is doing more of that. That's all standard reporting. And then now let's go drill down even farther and get the packet capture. So this workflow, this whole workflow from trouble ticket or whatever alarm you've seen to getting down to the needle in that haystack should be a matter of seconds, really, a couple minutes maybe. So to zoom in on this gives you a little more detail on what the tuples that we can look for, and MAC address and IP address obviously are the key ones you would look for. So I highlight MAC address, and then of course I go in and I did a capture on IP. And then you just run it. Step 2, run it, and you can send it to screen, you can save it to disk, and then read it in your favorite analyzing tool. And that's actually it. And I did it in 5.5 minutes. So really, I can give you the time back or open it up to Q&A. Yes.
Hang on one second.
He asked if, you can do that for the next one. He asked if the radio tap header was included. So obviously, if you're capturing on the wireless of those 4 different options, the radio tap header is included. Next question.
Michael, what version of Wing was that? Because I've been familiar with 5.8, 5.8.4.
Yes.
This does not look familiar at all.
It's 5.9. This is 5.9, the latest, and it's in NetScout. And I think this came out in this form in 5.9.0. Is that correct? Anyone? My colleagues? Got a couple colleagues? Yeah, 5.9.0. Okay, so we're on 5.9.1 now. Just being released. Anyone else? So the only requirement is Wing. There's no extra license. Spectrum Analysis does require a license, but other than that, it's just NetScout. NSite. I mix it up because we have another product, and NetScout.
WLAN interview.
Today I have Devin Akin with me. Devin, how are you?
Hey, doing fine, Keith. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. I thought it would help, actually, 1, give content to the podcast, 2, help with your tour. If we had a little discussion about 802.11ax and talk about what made you think about AX and that it should be something people need to learn right now, and talk a little bit about your tour you have coming up.
Yeah, sure.
Will that work for you?
Yeah, that works fine. So the reason...
All I got to do is start you up. I'll wind you up and say, go, Devin.
Okay, that's about right. 11ax is it's coming here shortly. Obviously, it's not here today, but in about mid-year of 2018, most of the more aggressive vendors, or at least ones who want to be aggressive with 11ax, are planning on releasing products. So just like we always do, we want to be a little bit ahead of this curve, both to know how it works or how it's supposed to work, and then what's real and what's not real. Is there going to be different waves coming? In other words, are we going to get this stuff piecemeal? Are we going to get it all at once? How much of it is marketing hype? As we've seen in the past, a lot of things like Wave 2 is just marketing hype. There's 4x4, which we have no clients for, 160 meg channels, which we don't use, and multi-user MIMO, which again, we don't really use. It's not really beneficial. So I wanted to...
But what will the marketing people have to talk about if they didn't have that?
I don't know, but I'm sure that they're going to come up with something for 11ax, right? It's a wireless LAN switch. It's hyper efficiency with 100-fold throughput increase, whatever. It's going to be something. And of course, this market is hyper aggressive, which means if one vendor starts off by putting in an ante of X multiple of throughput, or using some buzzwords and slang language about what this thing's going to do for us, then the next vendor will have to increase, will have to step it up in order to one up their competitor. And so I believe that because 11ax has the potential to be something real, something important, that the vendors are going to get hyper aggressive and go that much further on marketing. And I think that's a bad thing. So hence, I decided to do a tour. This is kind of a test tour. It's a 1 week, 1 day per location, 5 locations along the East Coast, starting in Alabama and touring up the coast, in order to get a little bit of a head start, to take a little bit of the wind out of the sails of marketing. Nobody's sponsoring this. There's no vendors involved. It's just me and my car going from place to place talking about this topic. So I wanted to be able to teach what's real, what's not, what does it mean and what does it not mean before the marketeers ever got their paws on it, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, it definitely does. And I don't know if you'll get there in time, since the marketers are already starting and running a little wild on it. So if someone wanted to attend your session, what do they have to do? Where do they go? Where do they find information about it?
Yeah, so they can go to my website to register. It's free. I've made the entire thing free. I'm just going to eat all the costs myself. So if you go to my website, divdyn.com, that's DIVDYN, that's short for Divergent Dynamics. And over on the right side, you've got events and 11AX tour. And if you would just sign up there, all 5 of the cities are listed in a drop-down. And I would appreciate if you actually did put the correct information, your name, your company. I'm not going to sell this to anybody. I'm not going to give it to anybody. This is just for me to know who's coming. And if you don't see a city in that list, of course, it's just kind of a trial tour. Feel free to suggest one in your comments box, because chances are that I'm going to do this in many other cities as well. I just wanted to do ones that are close to home to keep my costs low so that I can, keep this thing free. So feel free to suggest a city. I've already got dozens of cities suggested. I'd like to know how many in each city would be willing to attend.
Madagascar.
American cities for the time being.
American city. Oh, you're going to put a caveat on it.
Sorry.
So what would someone, if they, most of our listeners already understand B, G, N, AC, anything they need to prepare before they come to this session, or what can they expect when they show up at a hotel, right?
Yeah, so they can expect this to be like a first day of class, just a very, very quick intros. I don't know that we'll even get to do intros of everybody that shows up, depending on how many people come, but this will be like a class, it's not really, even though it's kind of a seminar tour by name, it's more like a class. And I'm going to hold it like a class because that's my purpose, is to educate. I'm not marketing. I'm not trying to, get the word out necessarily. I'm trying to educate on how this stuff works and what's real and what's not real, when it's coming, in what phases, and so on and so forth, what the vendors are saying, what the chipset vendors are saying. So this is an educational event. It's not meant to be any marketing. You won't see any vendor signs. You won't see me, putting name tags on people with vendors' names on. It's none of that stuff. It's just show up, get some coffee, sit down, and let's just have at it. So it will be extremely technical. So you ask about, what they should do to prepare. I would strongly suggest that anybody that comes to this would be at least at the CWNA level, at minimum. That would be the kind of a minimum criteria. If you have your CWDP and maybe even AP certifications, that's going to help you. This is a very, very technical seminar. It is meant to be a deep dive training class on this technology. It is not a marketing spew. Some of the presentations we've seen, although they're technical, they're still more marketing than they are technology, because they teach the theory of what 11AX might be and not what it will be, and not how to implement it, but rather how, what its intended goals are. So I'm trying to differentiate between even the highly technical or presentations we have seen so far from various vendors, and what's actually real and what you will do with it. How do you design for it? What are the caveats? What do you get for this if you just throw it out there? What do you get for it if you really design for it? And how do you design for it? So all of those, this is an 11AX whole day seminar. There's no prereq stuff. You won't see all the CWNA building up to it. We're going to jump right in.
On that note, and jumping right in, will you have any kind of, and it's just kind of a timing question, when vendors ship, will you have any real shipping or pre-shipping AX products to show?
No, I've looked into that, and the closest I could come to that would be Soho gear. And since this is really meant for maybe the higher end of SMB, certainly SME and enterprise, it would be a little bit on the pointless side for me to bring an 11AX Soho router, because it's not about raw speed. It's not about a file copy from a client. It's about, many devices working simultaneously. And I couldn't possibly set up a lab that could show you what's real. Even if I had an access point that could do it, I would need dozens of clients to be able to pull this off. So I want to keep this on the lecture side of things. So I won't have any show and tell at this point.
I know you're a lover of all things protocol, what's actually in the protocol. How far along are we in the protocol from the IEEE on this?
Yeah, right now it's at draft 2. So that's pretty early on. Sorry, draft 0.2. My apologies. Draft 0.2. So it's the second draft, but it's not a draft 2.0 like we are normally accustomed. I've been hearing whispers here and there that we might be launching products at a draft 1.0, but typically speaking, the draft 2.0 is where we go to market. Now, I can't speak to that definitively because I don't personally believe that the vendors even know yet. I have grilled and quizzed and begged and to get information, but the bottom line is even the vendors don't know all of it just yet. And since the standard is still in early draft phase, the Wi-Fi Alliance is already looking at this. Of course, they need interoperability, but which draft they'll work from is yet unknown because it's progressing at a pretty good pace at this point. And we do have still about somewhere in the 7-month time frame, 7 to 8 months time frame, depending on how aggressive these vendors are going to be before we see them hit market. So it's I think it is progressing quickly. But what I'm noticing, the more important thing that I'm noticing is out of all the pieces and parts that 11AX brings us, you've heard about BSS coloring and some of these things, a variable or adjustable receive sensitivity and uplink OFDMA and uplink multi-user MIMO and all these things. Most of this is completely marketing. Even though it's technology, it's still marketing because it's not real and it's not even going to be real. For example, just to give you a pretty clear example, the first gen chipsets undoubtedly are going to be just OFDMA. That is it. You're not going to see you'll get uplink with that, by the way, uplink OFDMA, and that's perfectly fine, and that's feasible and realistic. But uplink multi-user MIMO, heck, downlink multi-user MIMO's dead. It's been dead since it was born. It's useless technology. And the uplink would make the sounding process even worse than it already is, which is its Achilles heel. BSS coloring, you're not going to see it in first-gen chipsets. And yet we think, man, how great is that? Well, yeah, in theory, it is great. It's a great idea, but we're not getting it first-gen. There's going to be differentials between chipset manufacturers. One is screaming 8x8, 1024 QAM, and all these other things. The other one is screaming, no, that's bogus. There's no way you're getting any benefit out of 8x8. And, of course, be careful what you wish for with 1024 QAM. So we call that Ethernet. But I have worked out the RF math of that, looking at the requirements for SNR and what the distance would be, and you can still do that in room. And we are liable to get that first gen, by the way. So there's a lot of dividing here. What's real, what's not real, what comes in second phase, maybe in third phase, if there is a third phase or third wave, and then what's just marketing hooey that we're never going to see as much as they might want to market it.
Well, it sounds like an enjoyable day learning and talking about really, really deep technology. So no prerequisites, just show up and spend the day with Devin and learn about 802.1x. Any final thoughts about your upcoming tour?
Hopefully that's 802.11ax.
Oh, sorry, yes. Oh, yeah. I was actually reading it when I said that and still made a mistake.
So, I'm sorry, what was your question again, Keith?
Just any final thoughts? I was just recapping our discussion of who should come and why, and just...
Yeah, so I'm assuming that since it's free, there's going to be quite an attendance. I've only got space for about 20 people per event because of cost. Trying to rent really large rooms is very expensive. Smaller rooms are not so expensive. They're not cheap, but they're not expensive. So since I'm footing the bill for this, about 20, I might be able to get 25 in some of these places, but that's why I want you to register, because if you don't register, I won't be expecting you. And you might not have a place to sit. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I'm guessing that there'll be a lot of technologists there, but there'll probably also be some technology managers there, some folks who are wanting to understand, should they be preparing now? Should they wait a little bit longer? They're wanting to know, is this marketing nonsense or is there something real to it? And if there is something real, what do they need to do? What are the caveats? And I don't really mean to go shooting over those individuals' heads. But if you're a technology manager and you're not a practicing technologist in this field, there's a strong chance that the content of this seminar is going to go flying over your head. So I'm not willing to back down to the least common denominator. This is if you don't understand what I'm saying, my admonition here is, please do be prepared for this class technically, because I won't have time in one day to backpedal hardly at all. So I will answer questions certainly. But it's going to be a 9-hour day, from morning till, standard close of business and with an hour for lunch. So we're going to be moving pretty quickly, as always.
Well, great. So anyone who's interested in the 802.11ax tour with Devin Akin, go to divdyne.com and go ahead and register. Well, thanks for your time, Devin.
Hey, thank you so much, Keith. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.